One of the questions that keeps coming up is early stage companies are often resource constrained. Why should they be thinking of a product function, or what value does it add?
Well, I think if they're not thinking about product, there's a difference between having a product manager and the product management thinking. And I think if they don't have the product management thinking, then they're highly likely they won't make it. We talked about the fact of going from a technology into actually building a business. And I think one of the things we see quite a lot is that the technologists are enamored with their technology and believe if I build it, they will come.
They will come.
And unfortunately, that's not the case. And so we spend a lot of time with our companies kind of saying, okay, again, what do you want to be in the long term? What are the first steps? And a lot of the companies also say, well, we could go after 12 different markets. And I've seen a number of companies that have taken that approach who then end up not getting traction in any one of those, running out of money, and they can't raise more money because they don't have a solid plan. And so, we spend a lot of time figuring out, is there like this burning platform where customers just have got such a big problem, they're willing to take a risk on a young company with an unproven technology because the upside is so big or the downside is so great of not getting this fixed.
Welcome to Deep Dive, the podcast where we will explore the ins and outs of managing deep tech products. I'm your host Ravi Sundaram, and we'll be talking to product leaders about the intricate and innovative process of transforming cutting-edge science and technology into products that shape our future. Join us as we learn from these industry-leading experts on how to turn groundbreaking scientific discoveries into tangible real-world experiences. Today, we're joined by Miles Kirby, CEO of Deep Tech Labs in Cambridge, UK. Miles brings with him an illustrious career spanning both sides of the Atlantic, transforming groundbreaking ideas into multi-million-dollar revenue-generating products. Prior to Deep Tech Labs, he served as managing director of AV8 Ventures, a €150 million fund focused on early-stage investments in next-generation technologies, including mobility, big data, AI, digital health, and cybersecurity. Miles also led technology investments at Oxford Capital, where his portfolio included companies like UltraSoC, now acquired by Siemens, and Latent Logic, acquired by Waymo. His experience at Qualcomm Ventures, a $500 million corporate fund, provided him with invaluable insights into identifying, nurturing promising startups. Miles not only managed substantial investment portfolios, but also spearheaded an internal incubator and drove companies' efforts in augmented reality, wireless charging, and machine learning, culminating in 34 patents. His experience extends into building and leading product management teams for mobile phones and display groups at Qualcomm. Today, we'll tap into Miles' extensive experience, both as an investor as well as a product management expert, to unpack the nuances of product management in the world of deep tech. We explore why product management is a key function, common misconceptions of the role, and distinct product management cultures on either side of the Atlantic. Welcome, Miles. Thanks so much for making the time to do this. We're looking forward to learning from you.
My pleasure. Great to be here, Ravi.
Brilliant. To kick things off, perhaps you can tell us about your current role at the helm of Deep Tech Labs, the organization's mission, and how do you nurture next generation deep tech startups?
Certainly. So what we're doing at Deep Tech Labs is very much helping early stage founders, often technical or engineering-led companies. And what I found over my career is that there's a lot of companies who have got great technology ideas and they get seed funding, but then they aren't able to transition from an idea and a concept into actually a real business that's fundable and a go-to-market strategy and a focus on customers. And actually, that's very pertinent to this discussion we're having today, because it is really around understanding how do you apply your technology to solve a real world problem. So what we're doing is we founded with the University of Cambridge, with Arm, Cambridge Innovation Capital, and some others in Cambridge, and really helping these companies. We've had 50 companies come through the program so far in 10 cohorts, and one of the things we do is really help to stretch the scale of ambition. One of the things we found, and we'll talk a little bit about US versus UK probably a little bit later, but one of the things that we found was that not all companies were looking at the full scale of the opportunity. And so that's one thing that's really important, is to be able to say, how big can this opportunity be, and to really drive the opportunity. And I think that's one thing that's really important. We then help the companies all the way through from thinking about the big vision, then going through to more of the implementation. What actually is the product? What's the first market? What's the beachhead? a lot of founders have a vision of what they'd like to be in the long term, but then struggle with what do they need to be in the short term and what are the stepping stones to get there. So we help them with that by bringing over 500 experts that we've got, of which Ravi is one of our esteemed experts as well, but to work with the companies. And then we do a demo day at the end. And of course, fundraising is a critical part for many of the companies. So our last demo days that we had in Leeds and in Cambridge, we had over 750 people signed up to come along. And at each event, we had over 200 investors or investing entities came along. So that's incredibly powerful for these companies that they've now figured out the right go-to-market. They've got the right ambition, scale of ambition, and then they can go out, start on the implementation, but also to be able to raise the capital they need as well. So that's what we're all about. It's really exciting seeing all of these next generation technologies, but then really sort of getting down to how do you actually really build a business? And product management is a key part of that.
That's brilliant. I think I can't agree more in terms of taking the technology into and nurturing that into a business is something core to all of the things that you're doing within the program. One of the questions that keeps coming up is early stage companies are often resource constrained. Why should they be thinking of a product function, or what value does it add?
Well, I think if they're not thinking about product, there's a difference between having a product manager and sort of the product management thinking. And I think if they don't have the product management thinking, then they're highly, highly likely they won't make it. I mean, we talked earlier about the fact of going from sort of, a technology into, actually building a business. And I think one of the things we see quite a lot is that, the technologists are enamored with their technology and so believe, if they build it, if I build it, they will come.
They will come.
And unfortunately, that's not the case. And so, I think it is really critical. And we spend a lot of time with our companies kind of saying, okay, again, back to what I said earlier is, what do you want to be in the long term? What are the first steps? And a lot of the companies also say, well, we could go after 12 different markets. We could be a horizontal play doing everything. And I've seen a number of companies that have taken that approach, fortunately not ones I've invested in, who then end up not getting traction in any one of those, running out of money, and they can't raise more money because they don't have a solid plan. And so, we spend a lot of time figuring out where is the must-have application? Where is there like this burning platform where customers just have got such a big problem, they're willing to take a risk on a young company with an unproven technology because the upside is so big or the downside is so great of not getting this fixed. Again, that really comes back to understanding your customer, the need, the problem you're solving. And so that is really critical for the companies. So, I think while they're constrained by resources, this thinking is absolutely key. And if they don't do it, in my opinion, their probability of success is really low. So absolutely critical.
That's brilliant. I think the way you articulated that it's about having the product management thinking or using those strategies is the key bit, and various roles in a resource constrained company can take up that kind of thinking. There's also quite a few misconceptions of what product management thinking is.
Right.
Perhaps you can, from your perspective, articulate. How would you describe this function or this kind of thinking, and is there any difference from let's say a software based product management to our world of deep tech?
Yeah, certainly. So, and also I think the thinking between the US and Europe as well. So, I cut my teeth over in the US. So I spent 20 years in California and working for Qualcomm, as you mentioned. So sort of, a tech behemoth. But at the time I joined, it was growing very rapidly. And, it wasn't even quite clear it was going to make it, almost not being able to make payroll, at that time as well, where now they're in obviously a pretty strong position. But I think I've seen in many different organizations, product management being thought of as, well, this is just a project management type role, and that doesn't work. It's not just that's a separate function, and that's sort of making sure that the trains run on time, that the project is moving as it should. But I think the product management function is very different. It's very much around figuring out the technology, how can it be applied, but more importantly, what is really the problem that can be solved? What's the scale of the market that is there to make sure that it's a big enough market to make sure that you can make money at it. It does no good if you're losing money on every product that you ship, and then sort of figuring out how do you actually sort of go from that beachhead, that first customer, to expand, and then think about those stepping stones. So I think it's really important. I've seen in my career product management groups reporting to program management. I've seen them reporting to engineering. I've seen them reporting to sales. And I don't think any of those work because they all have got their own reason for being and their own priorities. And, the sales group is all about getting the sales orders, getting their bonuses. And it's all about, whatever the customer says, just do it. And that's not the right approach. There needs to be a balance there. I think on the engineering side, then, when it reports to engineering, then it's typically more around, oh, well, that's just too difficult. We can't do that. Or, that's not interesting. So we're not going to do it. So I think it really needs to, and then on the program management side, I don't think it works there either, because typically the senior management within the program management have cut their teeth on programs and don't really understand product and what it means and how critical it is. So I think where I see it work well is, typically reporting in sort of straight to the senior management, to the, part of the senior management team, so that there is enough sort of weight behind the view of product management that can then sort of trade off where sales says, no, but we need it because the customer said they'll only buy if we do this, to be able to go, actually, I don't believe that to be the case. We can do this, and then in the roadmap, the next generation, or this alternative will work for them. And then also, to be able to push back on engineering, where engineering says, "Oh, that's not possible." To be able to go back and go, "Well, actually, how about if we did it this way with this and this?" And well, maybe we can. So I think that independence is really important. And then you asked a little bit about sort of software versus kind of deep tech, and I've done sort of product management for both. I think the underlying sort of thinking it is the same, of course, because ultimately it's around figuring out the market and the product and where it fits in the value chain and so building all of that. The difference obviously is around on the software side, it is a little more around sort of the product feature capability. Obviously there's some R&D and some things that are unknown there, but I think with the on the deep tech side, typically thinking in parallel about the product roadmap and also the technology development roadmap and how those tie together. And effectively need a product roadmap that then can sort of effectively take out the capabilities that are built in the technology roadmap, but having the two of those running in parallel and making sure they tie together. I've seen some times where engineering setting the technology roadmap and it doesn't mesh with the product roadmap, and that's no good either. So I think the deep tech side, it is a little different. Software is maybe slightly simpler, but it depends exactly what you're doing as well. If you're doing something new, interesting, we'll talk a little bit maybe later about sort of multi-physics engine and using kind of iterative engineering approaches and sort of machine learning around putting all these together. So there's a lot of software in that, but there's a lot of technology development, if you like, and validation as part of that as well.
I think that's brilliant. In many ways, there's a lot that you unpacked over there. In many ways, the function is the way I think about it is it's a representative of the customer within the business. Yeah. So the points that you made of really understanding the customer and unlocking the problem, and almost you're sitting in between the customer and the business functions. You need and in terms of what you said about where the function sits within the organization, and giving it the emphasis of being independent at the right level helps people in this function balance that and prioritize opportunities accordingly and manage the roadmap. So I think you've articulated that.
And if I could add just one thing as well, I mean, one thing that I think is really useful is also to get the sort of the senior management folks to come along and meet the customers as well, right? Because when in isolation, engineers will come up with their own view of the world and what is important, and I think it's really critical to be able to get now you have to have the right sort of kind of engineering lead. I mean, there's some folks who need more coaching than others to be in front of customers. But I think for them to hear it firsthand and to be able to understand the problem really helps enormously. That then when you sort of go back and say, hey, look, we really need this feature or this capability, normally, they may say, well, I don't know, we can do it, we're too busy, whatever. But when you sort of say, oh, do you remember what Sarah said? And they couldn't actually take it to market unless this, I get it. Okay, well now, and so that partnership, because I've also seen, different groups where product management is kind of the enemy of engineering, and that, and it should be more of a collaborative approach. I mean, I think that's part of the challenge of product management is that it is a very collaborative sort of shared vision, right? And so I'm sure you've done this as well, but when you put sort of a product definition together, a sort of, a vision of where the business is going, if you don't have the buy-in from all the different groups, bad things happen. You need to get everyone bought in with that shared vision, and then it's very much provided that thinking, getting everyone bought in. Make sure you've got the right trade-offs between kind of the sales, the needs there, the revenue needs of the business, what engineering can provide, the timelines, and all of that, and so provide that and get everyone bought in. So it's a very interesting role, and I've also seen some people who just try to be more dictatorial, and this is what we're doing. And, depending on your organization, also generally that doesn't work well. I mean, I came from Qualcomm, which was very much an engineering-led firm. So engineering had sort of a huge amount of sway, and a lot of the senior management sort of were, promoted engineers. So be able to stand toe to toe with an engineer, and when they say, "Oh, that can't be done," to be able to say, "Yeah, bullshit. I think we can. How about if we do this and this?" And then if you get their respect, then I think you've got a really good, setup.
Yeah, this echoes with something that one of my mentors always says, that actually product management is the custodian of the shared vision and the owner of creating that balance between what you need immediately versus a product thinking where you want to build a product that actually meets a market and generates a business. So that's it aligns that very nicely. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Maybe if we take that a bit further, these nuances that we haven't spoken about, how have you seen the differences between these functions in the US versus Europe? Are there any anymore, or is it all converging towards something more?
Well, hopefully they're converging, but I don't think we're there yet. I mean, I think in the US, then product management is in most businesses that I've seen, and certainly big businesses, is just a core part of the of the corporate infrastructure, if you like. But that's now there's sometimes it gets put in the wrong group, as we discussed, or sometimes it's not quite in the right area, or there's different sort of issues with it. But it is viewed as something that's really important in most cases, and there have been certainly a few times in my career where there's been some sort of education required for the engineering lead or the sales lead. But I think when they start to see the value of the function, and then and you get their buy-in, then that works well. But I think coming back to Europe, so I came back to the UK now 12 years ago, and so really interesting kind of seeing a lot of companies who kind of, what is product management? There's an ongoing joke with someone I know well who's is always sort of joking, well, product management, isn't that just program management? Why do you need that? And I think while that's kind of an ongoing joke, it does represent, I think, some of the thinking in Europe, and I think that's changing. And I think for sort of deep tech companies, I think people are recognizing that it is critical. And certainly as we work with our companies, quite a few folks are sort of saying, well, I mean, fortunately, quite a few of them already do have product management groups, but others are kind of saying, well, actually, I think maybe we need this function. What do you think? Should we be doing this? And of course, my position is, absolutely. Back to my previous point of, do you need to hire a full-time person when there's only two of you? Maybe not, but you need to have that sort of mindset, that thinking, and then when you've got the capacity, you should be bringing those folks on, because it is a full-time function to be able to, especially as the technology develops, and of course it never develops the way you expect, and the customer needs change, and the market changes, so it's never kind of a static, we've defined it now, wait 6 months, and out the other side will pop the perfect product, right? Doesn't quite work that way.
Absolutely, and it just as you've articulated, it is a critical function, even more so because in deep tech you've got to have a view on, or have a pulse on, how the technology roadmap is evolving, and does it meet the market ramps that you're trying to hit? So it becomes even more critical over there. So it makes perfect sense.
Well, I think especially in a startup as well. I mean, product management in a in a very big business with you're doing product version number 23, and it needs to be blue as well as green, and it needs to be 2 centimeters bigger. that's different, right? And so that is, it's still similar function, but you've got sort of guide rails a little bit on sort of what you're doing. But I think that the function in this very early stage is, somewhat overwhelming, right? Because you can do everything and anything, and everything looks attractive. And so I think that real discipline and really sort of, cutting in. And I think also the other thing I find with a lot of founders is because they're technical, they want to do the most complicated, cool technical thing. And, and sometimes it turns out that putting, sort of a dumb, boring API on the front of your software, or sort of partnering with someone to provide some shim that goes between X and Y, actually is probably the most valuable thing you can do versus kind of making the wobulator, work at, double the frequency of what it was working at today. So I think that's also something that takes some education and understanding sometimes for the founders if they've come from more of a technical background and haven't done as much on the business side before.
Let's maybe unpack that a bit further in terms of the size of the company and how product functions should be positioned and evolve. As a 2-person or 3-person really pre-seed startup, how should the founders literally, because those think about dividing the roles, and how should the synergy be like between somebody thinking product like and versus a CEO, and how should it mature, or how have you seen it mature as the company grows?
Yeah. Well, I think to start off with, if it's sort of a technical founder and a CEO, then the CEO has to take that role, but obviously working closely with the engineering sort of folks as well. So it should be a very collaborative process there as they start to figure out which direction they want to go, and then as the as the team grows. I mean, again, deep tech, everyone is different, right? So there may be some key things that you need to be able to prove out. Is your thesis correct that going back to the maybe material discovery, and we've got one company that's looking at the quantum physics of materials, and they've got a model that sort of pops out suggestions for rare earth magnet replacement, and then they've got the next model that then sort of looks at what it would look like if you actually produced it. You've got to figure out, does that work? Does the output, can it be validated? So there's some things that obviously that you need to do there. But then obviously, right, in that example, you need to be thinking about, what is the market you're going after? What is where does the technology fit? Where's the market need? All of that. How do you engage with customers? And a lot of the startup journey is around discovery. Right. I mean, it's, you've got a thesis and then you go out and test it, and customers will tell you you're right about this and you're wrong about that. And by the way, they may tell you that actually the really big problem is over here that you'd never thought about. And that what you're talking about is, 3 years out or no one would ever pay for. So it is very much a journey of discovery. And I think, the CEO typically is kind of the lead evangelist, sales, product, all of that in partnership with the engineering folks, with the engineering lead as well. Now, as the organization grows and you start to get your plan together on where you're going on that first market, that first product, then you can start thinking as you build out the organization, do you have someone who has that product function? But I think, as with all these things, it's very much horses for courses. It depends, exactly what you're doing, how critical is this, and also the background of the founders as well. I mean, if you've got a founder who, really understands the product management function and sort of has that under control, that's great. If it's something that's just a black art that's confusing and they don't know how to do it and they've got no idea, what the product should look like, well, maybe they need someone who's sort of, more senior who can maybe do part-time role with them. Maybe they need to bring someone on full-time. So again, it really depends on the startup, but I think it needs to be something which needs to be thought about, and how's that function being fulfilled, and it can be fulfilled in a few different ways.
Are there any examples that come to mind of companies that you've come across? You may or may not want to name them, where it has gone really well, and maybe where it has not gone well at all, because there's no better learning than failures, and looking at successes as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's one company that I know the guy who is now running it, and it's in Cambridge, and it's called Second Mind, and it was called Prowler before, and that's one of the things he renamed. I think Second Mind is slightly better
Yes.
name. And so Gary Atchie was sort of running product management. Gary Brotman in San Diego, we know each other from Qualcomm days, and I think Second Mind, a lot of really good academics from the university, and they sort of spun out, and they were looking at multiple different markets, and they were looking at sort of insurance, they were looking at automotive, they were looking at where could their their algorithms be used, and so quite a lot of money was raised, and the company didn't getting traction in any one of those markets. And I think what Gary did sort of came in and really focused the business down and said, okay, where is there a real need, where's there a real customer, and focusing on the automotive. Got deals done. So the key partner who's now using their technology, deploying it, and so I think that was a real example of going from sort of we can do everything, we're a platform for everything, to that laser focus. And by over time, becoming a platform, it can be a fantastic plan, but you can't start as a platform, in my opinion. You need to be able to go after a real customer need. And sometimes you hear sort of the founders or the engineering leads kind of saying it's the same technology. Well, that's fine, but the market need, the product, the customers, the pricing, all of that is completely different. And so it's really critical to be able to have that that laser focus and where you're going first. And I think that's what Gary's been able to do really well with Second Mind, is sort of take it from doing everything to laser focus, and then really building the business based on that.
I think
So that's an example of both in one. Yeah, there you go.
both in one, indeed. Great example. What they've gone through and what you've mentioned is so pertinent to so many of the conversations that I've had with early stage companies. It's that focus, because there is this vanity in having a big market, and companies saying, hey, this is interesting in various different sectors. So I even have had conversations where I say, yeah, you get a big press release, that's a big bump, but then what? It's not going in the direction that you want your company to go, or it's not giving you the next step of your raise, or even can you even serve that kind of a customer? Do you have the operational baseline sorted and things like that? So
and that's actually something we talk to our companies about quite a bit. I mean, there's you'll sometimes have a grant that it looks really attractive and free money, non-dilutive, amazing, or a customer says, hey, I love what you guys are doing, how about we give you 100,000, 200, a million to do X. And we really caution people to think, is this on your product roadmap? Are you going down an evolutionary dead end that, so if you're getting a grant to do, to move down the path you're already planning, to develop your product roadmap, to get where you're going, that is phenomenal. But it's really dangerous to kind of go and get distracted, because, you've got limited resources, as we talked about before, and there's a huge opportunity cost. And while getting £500,000 in a grant sounds amazing when you're really low on cash, it could end up killing your business as well. So again, that goes back to why I think having this vision and this roadmap that you understand, that you can make decisions against, and be able to say, yes, this is a perfect match, or no, it's not. And it also tells you, if you've got a customer saying, I'll give you NRE to do this project, what parts do you need to own? What parts can they own? Are they buying exclusivity in a certain market? Can you take that to apply to another market? So again, all of this thinking, if you've got a plan and a vision, you can apply to it. If you're just kind of winging it, then you can end up sort of being down a dead end, and then sort of looking back down at the dead end going, oh, we probably shouldn't have come there, and maybe it's all too late by that stage.
Yeah, you're spreading yourself too thin very quickly at that point, so you're not going to be able to deliver on any customer in that sense. Another question, if I may ask, that comes through, especially early stage startups, is should their strategy, and should they build products with an aim for getting bought out? So most companies want to grow and generate revenue. There are a few companies that are, hey, especially in deep tech, we just want to build the technology, get it to the point, and get bought out. Can you actually build a product roadmap for that? Is that a good idea?
I think it's a bad idea. I mean, I think what you want to do is companies to do well. You want a company to be bought, not sold, right? So you want to be on a roadmap, on a plan to greatness. And then if someone comes along to acquire you, you can make a decision on whether to be acquired. And realistically, obviously, some companies are unlikely to be able to raise, £1 billion to be able to build a massive business. But you need to have a viable plan, and to be able to walk away from a deal. If you're running out of money, you've got no options, and you're trying, you need to be sold. People smell blood in the water, and you're not going to get the value that you're hoping for. So I think you need a realistic plan. Often a big player can help accelerate the deployment of the technology. I mean, one of our companies, went through an acquisition. They were looking to raise a Series A. An acquirer came along. They were looking at putting the round together, and it was a Nasdaq listed company. And the founder was the CTO, and his vision was he wanted to see his technology widely deployed. And so for him, this was a great option in the engineering team, because there was now sort of a larger, much better funded organization with the connections into the ecosystem and into customers. And so for them, that was that worked out well, I think. But at the same time, they weren't building the business to be acquired. They were building the business to grow. So I think at the same time, you need to be cognizant of who might be acquirers as part of just understanding the ecosystem, who are competitors, who are potentially acquirers. And I've also seen an example. There was a couple of companies a few years ago doing some interesting work around femtocells in these sort of small base stations, if you like, for sort of 3G, 4G, 5G. And one company had a really strong product. The other one had a product that was probably equivalent, but they had a really good relationship with one of the massive players. They end up so one company got acquired for, I think it was like 200 or 300 million, and the other one ended up, effectively being bought for £1. So, and the difference was that the go-to-market was going through one of these very big players, and, that relationship that was built there was critical. So, not that, the plan from day one for the company that was acquired was to be acquired, but also being cognizant that building that relationship was absolutely critical. And then the big player said, this is so important to our business, we want to own it.
So essentially what I'm hearing is build to grow the company, and if the opportunity arises and it matches your vision, you may go for it. And those are the more successful acquisitions that you've seen.
And then you're bought versus trying to be sold, right?
Exactly. Brilliant, Miles. This has been a fantastic conversation already. As we conclude, I usually ask our guests a key piece of advice that you would give people just starting out in product management in general, but maybe especially in deep tech, or something that you would tell yourself as you're starting out.
Yeah, I think it's always interesting to think about what you would tell yourself, or sort of what you've learned, because after a while, as your thinking changes, and to go back and think. So, I mean, I think for people starting on the product management side, I mean, I started, engineering degree, then I did application engineering, then I helped to set up an R&D department. And I think for me, I kept kind of thinking about, the technology is interesting, but actually I'm interested in how this actually gets sold and what the product is, and then sort of expanding, and ultimately end up sort of, looking at doing startups, because that was kind of the big picture of putting it all together. And I think that's what fascinates me, is all these sort of moving parts. And I think product management is really exciting because it is very much, I would say, really step back from the technology. I mean, a lot of people really get excited about technology. I think what you need to do is immerse yourself in the market, understand the technology, talk to customers. And what happens is it's a very iterative process, right? So it's about kind of getting all of the data floating around in your brain. And then you start to kind of go, well, what about this with that? And could this fit? And you have to put a few of those together. You iterate them, understand the size of the market. As a recovering engineer, I like a good spreadsheet. So I like to be able to sort of put in there, think about the different markets, the size of the market. Is it a fit for us? Is there enough margin for us? Do we have a competitive advantage? Does it lead, and all of these things. And ultimately sort of start to put that together, helps to iterate. You can then sort of, talk to engineering, you can talk to sales, talk to customers about some of these propositions. Again, iterate. And then ultimately you start to kind of figure out, actually, typically it's fairly obvious after a while that you kind of look at these, and even if this scoring methodology that I like to use is good to start that first order filtering, but then you end up going, actually option 3 should really be option 1, and option 1 really isn't that good for these reasons. It really should be 4, but it gives you a mechanism to be able to do that. And so I think it's this continuous learning, this continuous testing. I think you've got to really sort of love and be excited about it, because your brain just needs to be churning over stuff. You wake up in the middle of the night or the morning of like, oh, wait a minute, that customer said this and that. I think we could do something there. So I think it is a fantastically fun role, and quite cerebral. You have to really sort of spend a lot of time thinking. But the big danger that I see sometimes is people just kind of sitting in a darkened room, doing some reading, and then going, oh, I know the solution, and it's a very academic solution, which you'll never, until you engage with customers, you don't really understand what their needs are. You'll come up with your thesis, and some of it will be right, and a lot of it will be wrong. So again, it's all that iterative sort of process, and so staying, even as the product develops and the market develops, keeping nimble. So taking that step back, and also just to be, I think you have to be confident in your own view of the world, and you'll have engineering saying, oh no, we could never do that, or sales saying, oh, we couldn't charge that much, or actually they want it blue, not red. And so I think, and again, prove your thesis out, but you have to be that sort of independent mind. You need to bring everyone else along with you, but you can't be too swayed by any one customer or engineer or any stakeholder. So I don't know that that's helpful, but maybe sort of how I think about it.
That's immensely helpful. You've summarized almost all of the people that I've had on the podcast, all of their knowledge together into one beautiful thesis of immersing yourself in the market, forming a product thesis, and then don't dictate and execute, but rather iterate and evolve, and get roadmap evolved over time to something that the customer would really benefit from, and that's brilliant. Sage advice there. Excellent. Other question I'd like to ask is, in your position, you're probably seeing a lot of deep tech trends. Any unusual ones or things that you really piqued your curiosity? I mean, outside of the obvious AI and quantum and so on.
Yeah. No, I think, I mentioned a little bit before, but one area that I'm really excited about is this kind of multi-physics of AI combination. So I think, if you ask ChatGPT to come up with a quantum computer, right, it's not going to know what to do, right? It'll come up with something, but it's unlikely to be executable. Yeah. But I think what's interesting is combining actually sort of models, and I mentioned one sort of on material discovery. We've got another company, Monumo, who's really interesting, who's doing end-to-end motor design, and and that's from the electrical side, from the magnetic side, from the physical side, from the drive schemes, and so what they're doing, they've got all of these. It's a multi-physics model, so it's got it's got one around the flux, it's got one and all of these, and so combining them together and then iterating very quickly is a really interesting model, because I think as humans, if you look at if there's a space this big of options, we've kind of done a little bit here, just random of where we happen to have found something that might work. But there's this huge kind of area that's unexplored. And as humans, we don't have the bandwidth to be able to do all of that. And to be able to do that kind of in silico testing is phenomenal. And obviously you have to make sure that the models work, and there's a risk that it doesn't. But I think that's a really interesting space, and I think we're going to see that in a lot of different areas. And effectively, what you end up with a goose that's laying golden eggs, because you can say, okay, if it's a material discovery, and that's where we have really interesting discussions with the companies. It's like, well, you could sell software, but you're leaving so much value on the table. Or do you go to the other extreme and you actually sell one material and then do the next material? Well, massively capital intensive, and how do you build it? And what are the things you can do in between? But I think if those models work, we're going to see absolutely massive value there, and so that's one of the areas that I'm really excited about.
Oh, that's brilliant. That's definitely exciting. Is there a resource or a book or books that you normally recommend to people, or you find extremely useful?
To be honest, I've been, I can't think, I was thinking about this earlier, is there sort of one book? I think what I find sort of most useful is one thing I really enjoyed. So I did a master's in California, and I love the Harvard Business cases. I found those were fascinating because, they're very, very practical, and, that you can kind of go through those case studies, and it's kind of nice because you get the break. And when I was doing my MBA, you'd kind of like, okay, read the first part, and then what would you do? And then to be able to kind of read, well, what actually happened? So I find a lot of those use cases and so practical examples really useful. And I think that's also part of the way we run Deep Tech Labs is very much around everyone's different, right? So there's no book that says, deep tech, commercialization, 101, if this, do this, right? They're all different. And so I think that's why, what we do is to bring all of these experts, to work with the companies to help share that knowledge and that brainstorming, and to be able to come up with ideas on how you might execute. So I think there's the sort of academic how product management works, which is great, and obviously recommend that people do that and go through that and understand that. But then there's the actual implementation, and I think case studies, examples, looking at different business models from other areas. You could say, okay, well, this worked over in the telecom space, and now you're applying it to the biotech space, or and I think often actually companies who are really successful, not only do they have technology innovation, but often it's a business model innovation that goes along with it, which it really captures value. So that combination. So no one book. I'm sure there's lots of great books out there, but I do like, some of these case studies, because, just for me, that whole practical and what actually happened afterwards, I find fascinating.
Oh, absolutely. We'll try and link to some HBR case studies on the show notes. But I really like the way you use the resource in the sense of read the first half, think what you would do, and see what happened. I think that's actually
That's the
pretty
way I find the best learning, right? I'm not so good at listening to someone lecture to me, but if you sort of, if I've got to solve a problem, then that's how I really engage and sort of, internalize the learning, if you like, but the learning by doing.
brilliant. This has been great, Miles. So how can listeners learn more about the work you're doing, and how can they reach you?
Certainly. So we've got a website at dtl.vc, so deeptechlabs.vc, dtl.vc. And then also there's hello@dtl.vc if you want to send an email. But if folks are interested in working with us, we're always looking for amazing experts to help work with our companies, VCs to come along and to our demo days to help the companies, and of course, amazing founders who have got a nugget of amazing technology that are trying to figure out how do I actually build a real business here. And I think, we think about this building the solid foundation that you need to be able to go on and build a real business.
Excellent. No, I can vouch for the program and the accelerator, and I'll link to the website and email ID in the show notes so people can reach out to you. Miles, this has been amazing. It's all what I wanted to get out of this conversation, and I'm sure our listeners will learn a lot from it. Thank you very much for taking the time.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me along, and it's always fun to talk about product management and really exciting area. And I think absolutely critical to success of deep tech companies, and well, all companies, but especially deep tech.
Thank you very much.
If you like that conversation, please subscribe. You could also engage further by joining the Deep Tech Syndicate Substack and Slack channel via the link in the show notes. You'll be tapping into a network of the brightest minds in deep tech product.